Accident victims like you deserve better. A husband and wife were rear-ended, and insurance offered them $10,000. We litigated the case and got them $375,000. Qualified expert attorneys can get you more. Call Zirkin and Smerling today.
Good morning, Baltimore, and happy December. It's our first show of December, Lauren. It's been a couple of weeks since we got together. How have you been?
It's a stressful time of year.
It is.
But we're almost at the end, almost at the fun part.
Yeah, it's the fun part. I think this is it. This is it for me. I'm wrapping up at the end of this show and going into full winter break shutdown and taking a trip down to the Big Easy with the family next week. And
Nice.
probably the last road trip in our storied career of traveling the American interstate. Kids are getting too old to want to do it with us anymore, but certainly looking forward to our last hurrah. What do you got planned for the holidays?
Saturday, I'm just heading to my parents' house in Virginia. Not as exciting, but
This sounds pretty exciting. Get to see your mom.
yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Niece and nephew who are very cute, so I look forward to seeing them.
Yeah, excellent. And so we're wrapping up the year and going out in a pretty much a flurry of activity for us on the civic and political front. I've been following a couple of storylines. One, primarily the last couple of weeks been looking at what the Public Service Commission was going to do on the BGE rate hike. Have you had a chance to keep up with that whole scenario, that situation?
A bit. I'm not too happy with it.
Yeah, we'll see. Not quite sure of what what's going to happen next, but we've had some of our local leaders have been really on top of that situation and been advocating strongly on behalf of all Maryland ratepayers, to BGE, and really been vocal in their leadership, and trying to avoid the Maryland ratepayers from having to absorb some of the BGE investments, but. Zeke Cohen has been really one of our big advocates there, and we're lucky enough today to have Zeke join us to talk a little bit about that situation, among other things. Good morning, Councilman Cohen. How are you doing today?
Hey, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
As well. Thank you, sir. And as Lauren and I were discussing, the BGE situation has been something we've been tracking, on the show, and. Obviously, we had a couple of different scenarios going on with them, from the regulators to the conduit situation, and obviously the rate hike. But before we get into all that, Councilman, for those who might live under a rock and might not be familiar with our illustrious councilman over in the first district, would you like to maybe introduce yourself to the viewers who don't know, and give them a brief bio and history of your public service?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Zeke. I represent District 1 on the Baltimore City Council. So that is going to be everything from Harbor Point, Harbor East, all the way out to Dundalk. So you think about neighborhoods like Patterson Park, Canton, Fells Point, Little Italy, Graceland Park, Highlandtown, Broning Highway, O'Donnell Heights. It is a beautiful, vibrant district, and just an absolute pleasure to get to represent. I'm a former public school teacher. I taught in West and in South Baltimore for about 7 years, ran a nonprofit organization where we taught civic leadership to high school students. And then in 2015, decided to run for city council and was elected in 2016 and reelected in 2020, and have just absolutely loved my time in public office. It is the best job in the world, and it is like a PhD every single day in some topic. And I'm really glad we're going to get some time to talk about BGE, because I think that some of what they do has really gone under the radar for years. And I think, Desmond, I appreciated you coming out to our press conference. I know we'll get into it later, but to me, this feels like the first time in a long time where there's been some real public accountability and where folks have really said, like, hey, wait a minute, we don't have to accept absolute mediocrity from this monopolistic utility. We can actually push back and advocate to the Public Service Commission and to the regulatory agencies that are in charge here that this one company should not get to dictate all the terms in our city and in our region. And so I appreciate your ongoing coverage and advocacy of this issue, and I really look forward to getting into it with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilman. And I can tell you, as I go around the city, as you know, City Voters Live is we got our cameras out there, and I'm looking at just some of the, as you mentioned, this utility is some of the things that they are doing. When I went to Fells Point a couple of days ago, and I get out, I park my car, I get out, and I see just this area of the sidewalk, Lauren, that's completely dug up. And apparently they had to do some work there, but then the way they repair it wasn't repaired. It was just they covered it up, right? And this is in front of somebody's shop, and it's just made the footpath so treacherous. And the accountability, as you mentioned, Councilman, is extremely important. And to the extent that we can on this show, we want to start to make sure that we're coordinating with a lot of those advocates that you brought together. You mentioned the press conference, and thank you for including Baltimore City Voters and City Voters Live in that. But a lot of those, and we're reaching out to some of the other advocates that were in attendance to bring them onto the platform and discuss their perspectives and their views. So thank you for making those introductions for us. And, together, hopefully, we can all, take our respective roles and responsibilities and make a difference, for the ratepayers and the citizens of Baltimore and beyond. And, another one of those situations that we were, you and I were advocating together again against, and just for more transparency was the conduit deal. And so I wanted to kind of get your opinion. I know you were vocally in opposition of it was either the deal itself or the process by which the deal came into existence. And I just wanted the voters to hear from you directly. What was it about the conduit situation that got your attention and was got your advocacy?
Yeah, and so I should say, in the interest of full disclosure, I am running to be the Baltimore City Council president. And I will say this was one of the rare moments where Council President Nick Mosby and I were in complete alignment about this not being the right deal for Baltimore. And it was one of those moments where myself, City Council President Mosby, Bill Henry, our comptroller, and pretty much all of my colleagues, from what I could tell, were in lockstep that this did not present a great deal for Baltimore. Folks should know that Baltimore is somewhat rare in that we still control and own our conduit. That's the sort of underground system that utilities utilize in order to do what they do. And Comcast uses it. Many of our large corporations in town either lease or rent parts of the conduit from us. But in 2020, I believe, we passed a referendum that made it clear. And I remember at the end of his mayorship, I think Jack Young was really championing this, that we would never sell our city's conduit. It is too valuable of an asset. And I think when you look around the country and you see cities that have gotten into business and sold either their conduit or their parking meters or like major assets that they own, often the cities get taken for a bath. And that is the concern here as well, is that this is a profitable asset and we should not sell it. And so the voters, the people of this city, made it crystal clear that we should not sell the conduit, that we should keep control of it. And so when the mayor entered into negotiation with BGE, the deal felt to me like a entryway, a doorway into a potential sale or acquisition of the conduit. And whether it was intended that way or not was unclear, because at the time, and you'll remember, the information was extremely opaque. There was a true rush to get this deal through. You had 2 of the 5 Board of Estimates members, that's President Mosby and Comptroller Bill Henry, actually protest and not show up at the Board of Estimates because they were so frustrated at the speed at which this deal was moving through. And what we
and lack of transparency.
It's about the transparency. And what we now know, and this is why we sent a letter. Sorry to get into the weeds here, but we sent a letter a couple weeks ago.
Get into the weeds. This is your platform to get into the weeds. We love the weeds.
and the Public Service Commission, and we asked them to have BGE publicly disclose their rationale. They wrote up their, I assume, lawyers and accountants and their internal team wrote out a rationale for why this was a great deal for BG&E. Not for the ratepayers of Baltimore, not for the state of Maryland or the city or our city, but for Baltimore Gas and Electric. And one of the things that was in that memo was, which by the way, they refused to publicly release, even when I sent them a letter, it was the PSC compelling them to release it that got them there. But when they did release that memo, one of the things they said is essentially, this could be a first step toward acquisition of the conduit. And to me, that says it all, that this was a deal that happened in the dead of the night. It was too quick. It lacked complete transparency. And for me, as a member of the city council, as someone who has a clear vested interest and stake, as we all do, in our amenities and assets like the conduit, I am in no way, shape, or form comfortable with us ever selling this asset, and certainly not even the deal that was cut where we long-term leased it. The numbers were unclear. The benefit to the city was unclear. It appeared that BGE was going to essentially try to capitalize off of it, even without its ownership. And so everything about this deal to me felt like great for BG&E and their shareholders, not great for the residents of Baltimore City. And guess what? I don't represent BGE's shareholders. I represent the people of Baltimore. And I think that, as we've seen these kind of deals with BGE and with some of our large corporations in town, I really think there is a role that has not always been flexed or utilized.
We've lost audio with you, Councilman.
Oh, okay. You still there? Hey, can you hear me? Hey.
Back now.
Yeah.
Back now?
Yes.
Am I good?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. Look, I really think there is a role for the city council, for all of us to play in being that fiscal watchdog and in holding utilities, large companies that want to do business with Baltimore accountable. Listen, we want everyone to come in. We want Verizon and Comcast and Google and everybody to compete for access to being our internet provider. But we don't want a monopolistic situation where our hand is forced and we end up giving out incredible 10-year deals for these companies without getting enough back in return for the residents that we represent.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. The fact that we actually own our underground utility network, and I mean, you've got internet in there, you've got gas service in there, you've got electricity in there, you've got everything that homes and cities need, to function and have utility, is running through that system. And as Councilman correctly noted, most municipalities don't own theirs. We do. Right. So we can set the market at it, and we were getting a great rental price for it, so why would we we were getting, just from BGE alone, we were getting $27 million a year in rent, right? And now under this new deal, we get 1 million, right?
That's right.
But and we can get into the details of the deal a little bit later. But in
And let me,
exchange,
if I could just say one more thing, Desmond, as well. So one of the things that we found out is that BGE's third quarter earnings report stated that their quarterly net income has increased from 33 million in 2022 to 45 million this year, in part due to the favorable impacts of the multi-year plans. So this 3-year plan that they got after the deal for the conduit is enhancing their shareholder values. And again, as someone who, I want every business, particularly small businesses in my city, to succeed, but not on the backs of ratepayers who are already strapped, who are already struggling. Even today, I went into my daughter's school, and one of the folks came up to me. She's a school nurse, and she said, "Man, I can't believe BGE is going to raise our bills once again." And was really appreciated that we took the fight to BG&E, but people are at their limit. Folks are living on the margins, and to continuously raise the bills just so that their shareholders can benefit, I think, is wrong. And again, I think it is really incumbent on the city council, the mayor, the comptroller, all of us, and the residents. And I'm glad you raised the advocacy, because I want to talk about that later, but to really push back and hold these utilities accountable to make sure that we get the best deal, not just them.
Exactly. And how that deal came about was just unconscionable. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, in my life anywhere, let alone right here, in our hometown, where, as Councilman mentioned, in a desperation move to slow down the process and the speed at which that deal was trying to get through, we had 2 of our 5 members of the Board of Estimates just completely, not go to a meeting just to get the train to slow down a little bit, and we can debate all day the legality of whether or not that hearing that took place was legal. I mean, of course, that had to be challenged in a different way. But here's the thing, Councilman, just from a common sense perspective, if I'm a businessman, if I negotiate a good deal, right, and I'm telling you that it's a good deal, I'm going to talk about that deal. I'm going to show you every aspect of that deal. I'm going to point to you and tell you exactly where the value is, in that deal. And we just didn't get that level of transparency from the folks that were pushing it. It's like, if you're telling me it's a good deal and it's good for me, just show me exactly how that is, right? Show me where I benefit, right? And
exactly. And sorry to jump in, but to the point where, when myself, the Office of the People's Council, when folks wrote to BGE asking to just see their internal documentation on why this deal made sense, they refused to do it.
Right.
And that should tell you everything.
All you need to know.
Because you're absolutely right. If this is such a good deal for the ratepayers, then why wouldn't you show your internal memo, which justified the deal for BG&E? And again, I think the constant obfuscating, the constant unwillingness to be transparent at a very basic level, to me, is just deeply concerning. And again, this is I mentioned their quarterly earnings have gone dramatically up, but this is a company that has made an extraordinary amount of money doing business with the city of Baltimore and with our region. And I just feel like for any partner to the city, there has to be give and take, and there has to be a level of transparency and just a level of respect for the people that live here, the people that frankly pay my salary, that contribute and pay taxes in Baltimore, deserve to know what their utility bill goes to pay for. And to my mind, paying, and I know we'll get into this too, but paying for a 3-year gas line build out that many folks felt they did not need, and that really just doubles and triples down on fossil fuel, as our source of energy at a time when our planet is burning and where we see this climate crisis, I just think is just again wrong. Right. And we were able to push back and get some savings at the Public Service Commission, but not nearly enough.
Right. Thank you. And great segue into that. So the second big utility issue was the whole request for the rate hike. We know that the conduit situation contributed to the amount of rate hike that they were looking to get. The other part of that is this huge project that they want us to fund, and to some extent we're successful in getting us to do it as ratepayers. Talk to us a bit about the rate hike, Councilman, whatever you want the viewers to understand and know about what you've researched about BGE's intentions on the $408 million. Obviously the decision came out last week, I think it was Thursday or Friday, that they requested a $600 million rate hike, or $600 million plus. They were awarded $408, I believe, million of that request. Just tell us your thoughts on that entire process throughout your advocacy, and how you feel about the decision of the PSC and what we might be able to do going forward.
Absolutely. So just for your viewers and listeners, so Baltimore Gas and Electric sought a $602 million rate increase. And essentially, this is to build out their entire fleet of gas lines. So you think about the regulators, which became a huge struggle across our city about whether they could place them internally or externally. Ultimately, it was proven that placing them externally has no public safety benefit. And so they were compelled, again, by the PSC to give people an option whether to go inside or outside. But the $602 million essentially would help them to build out their gas line. And what I started to hear was concerns from, number one, environmental groups. So folks who are saying, look, we as a city, as a state, we have some really aggressive climate goals. And for Baltimore, which, as you both know, is right there on the water. When there's heavy rain, the harbor floods, Fells Point can flood. Doubling down on gas is probably not the way to go, because everything we're hearing is that we need to start transitioning. We should be doing more electrification. But this project essentially ensures that we will be shackled to BGE's gas pipeline for the foreseeable future. And while we know that I'm not advocating an immediate transition away from gas, we do know that if we are going to survive as a planet, we dramatically need to lower our carbon footprint. And that means alternatives. And as a partner to the city, as a partner to the state, BGE should be really working to improve Maryland's climate goals instead of making our climate worse. So that's number one. I also heard from...
Yeah, it's not an investment in renewable stuff. Yeah, go.
That's right. And we also heard from Marilyn Perg, who has been just really doing great consumer advocacy, a woman named Emily Scarr, who's been on this the whole time. And what she said is, look, if BGE wants to build out their gas pipeline project, fine, but let them pay for it. Don't put that on the backs of residents who, again, are already struggling to pay their basic bills. That this is like asking, it's like for me, a city council person, to ask residents to build a house for me that I can just live in and call my own, and then ultimately profit from when I rent out the rooms or sell the house, right? Like, that does not make any sense. We also started to hear from unions, folks like SEIU 1199, the healthcare workers, who were saying, listen, just at a basic level, our members can't afford another dramatic BGE increase. We're already paying a ton for our water bills. We're already paying for Comcast. There's all these little fees that people are finding. We are tapped out, and we can't afford another huge hit from Baltimore Gas and Electric. And so all of a sudden, you had this coalition emerge of and a pretty abnormal coalition, because normally the environmental folks and the unions are kind of on the other side of each other. But in this case, you had those folks, you had good government folks, like I'll count you all, Desmond and Lauren, in that category, folks like Marilyn Perg, Marceline White. You just had this really interesting coalition. Ray Kelly got involved from the Citizens Policing Project, because he said, look, I live in Sandtown where our residents are financially stressed and we can't afford this. And so you just had all these different players come together. And initially, I sponsored a resolution which passed among my colleagues that called on the Public Service Commission to reject Baltimore Gas and Electric's 3-year rate case, and just basically said this is too much. It is inappropriate for all the reasons I just enumerated, the environmental issues, the consumer advocacy issues, and just the fact that people cannot absorb this hit right now. We shouldn't do this. And the city council signed on. We sent that resolution to the PSC. We did several press conferences. There was one just 2 weeks ago, which you came and spoke at. And again, what I thought was really interesting, Tharu Vignaraja was there. He had done some really great advocacy on the regulators issue and was involved in a whole lawsuit against Baltimore Gas and Electric. Just this really kind of outside the box coalition of people all came together to say, look, this is not appropriate. And so we spoke out the day before the ruling was supposed to be made. And what ended up happening is, as you mentioned, Desmond, the Public Service Commission granted $408 million out of the $602 that BGE had requested. And look, I will say this. I think a few things. One, I think if it were not for the advocacy of folks like yourselves and many others, they would have gotten the whole kit and caboodle. Because I think that, like I said earlier, this is the first time in my memory where folks have really paid attention, where the Office of the People's Counsel has been, which is, a relatively new office, has been incredibly aggressive, and where communities from Fells Point to Sandtown have all united to say enough is enough with this monopolistic utility. And so I am proud of that advocacy, and I'm proud that we cut it down to $408 million. I am disappointed, though, because I think that the Public Service Commission could have gone much further. I wish that they had just said no to BG&E, which was really our message the whole time. Let them build their own gas pipeline on their own dime, not on the backs of the people that I represent. So again, I think $408 million, while it is not $602 million, is still too much. They're looking at, they had asked for $1.4 billion in spending over the next 3 years. The commission essentially approved around $1 billion. And again, I think that what is also unfortunate and needs to be pointed out, and it's back to the deal, is that the commission did allow BGE to profit from the city-owned, and again, it is still city-owned conduit over the next 3 years, even though they acknowledge that it is unclear that ratepayers will benefit from that deal. BGE is now going to have to perform an analysis and let us know, but that is going to be after the fact. And I would guess they are going to write that analysis in a way that shows everything is great. And so for all those reasons, I just think that we have got to take a harder stance and posture when it comes to folks like BG&E. And I'm grateful to all the residents that stepped up. My council colleague, Councilman Antonio Glover was with us as well. Several of my colleagues said, listen, I can't be there for the presser, but I'm with you. We know that this is going to happen again, that BG&E will be relentless. They will come in for every penny, nickel, and dime that they can take. And so it is important that even though the decision has been made, that our coalition does not fracture, right, and that we continue to push back, and that when they come in for the next thing, and certainly in 3 years from now when they come back to the PSC, that we continue to stand up and say no to this very monopolistic company that is BGE.
No, I agree, and I was equally elated to see the coalition that you pulled together, and you're right. We have to stick it out and stick together. Know they're coming back, so we need to be bigger, stronger, and louder. When they do.
That's right.
And a big portion of this is made possible. And I think anyone that has hung out with me long enough will know they're probably tired of hearing me talking about the structure of our city government and how it needs to be rebalanced. There's too much power concentrated into one seat, and I think a big part of that is the structure of the Board of Estimates, and you have also been fairly vocal about that particular aspect of our government. And for those who don't know, the Board of Estimates is what controls our spending board. Currently has 5 members to it. One being the City Council President, who presides over the board, the Comptroller, and the mayor. Those are 3 elected seats, but those last 2 seats are filled by mayoral appointees. So, it's almost like, why have a board if one person always wins? So at that point, it's just a documentation system. So I just wanted to kind of get your feedback. So I've heard, different differing opinions coming from you as far as whether or not it needs to be a rebalance of the power of the board, all the way to complete, abolition of the board and moving it all together. So just so the voters and even myself, this will be educational for me. Just talk a little bit about the Board of Estimates, what you foresee, and what you think that is the the direction that Baltimore should be heading in.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question, and again, the advocacy, because I just fundamentally feel that our system of governance in Baltimore has failed the citizens of this city time and time again, right? And we don't even need to go back to Mayor Pugh's challenges with contracts that were going out for books through the Board of Estimates. We've just seen again and again and again, it is simply too much power concentrated into one individual person. And what I have unfortunately said, and what even Brandon Scott, before he became mayor, have said, is this structure where it is exactly your point. It really is just one person that controls the entire Board of Estimates, which doles out every single contract in the entire city. It is not sustainable. It's not good for the residents. I don't even think it's good for the mayor themselves, because, the way, I think about this a lot, the way the media treats our governance here is like everything, good, bad, indifferent, it's all about the mayor. Right. And that's not reality. Like, one single person cannot save our city. It's got to be all of us working together. There is a real role for the other 2 citywide elected officials, the city council president and the comptroller. There is a real role for residents to play in governance in our city. And I think this heavy concentration of power in the mayor's office has been a disservice. We've seen multiple corruption scandals. We've seen it just has not worked out for residents. And again, I would argue that, the mayor sneezes and, the entire media is like, oh my goodness, like something happened. It's just too much. And I think it creates unrealistic expectations for what one single person can do. And so I proposed some legislation actually right after the conduit deal that would have essentially stood up a task force to take a look at best practices across the country and determine exactly that question, whether we should abolish the Board of Estimates and just go with what they do in some cities, which is you have either non-elected folks, you have a city administrator, or you have your city council that can vote contracts. Or do we want to rebalance it where, I think the simplest solution, and I'm certainly not the first to think of this, is give each of the citywide elected officials one vote and no appointees. So you would have the mayor, the city council president, and the comptroller, all of whom are citywide elected and really have the mandate of the people to govern. Each of them would get one vote. And so it would not be a situation where the mayor gets to single-handedly determine what happens. It would have to be negotiation, debate. And I think in that kind of scenario, you wouldn't see what we saw with the conduit deal, where one person says this is great, but everybody says not so great, slow down, and the one person wins every single time. And so for me, I really trust the people of this city. I think that this should be something that is not just like, because my concern, if we were to just make it, the city council does it, or make it, 1-1-1-1, is people would say, hey, that's political. Like Zeke's running to be city council president. This is just a power grab. And that's why I wanted to enable a task force that could determine the best course of action and then put it on the ballot for residents. Because my concern is always, I don't even want folks to suggest that this is about a power grab. To me, it is genuinely about how do we figure out the best governance for our city, and just an acknowledgement that, and this is not a swipe at the current mayor, but
it's the system, not the people.
It's the system. Exactly.
Yeah.
And if everybody has said, until they get into that job, that this system of governance is not great for the people that live here, including the current occupant of that job, then maybe we should do something about it. And again, I totally understand how when you get in there and you become the mayor and all of a sudden you've got all these crises and all this incoming, I think you want as much power as possible because you want to be able to control everything. But that has not worked out for Baltimore. And I just think a more equal distribution of power would be better for the people that live here.
And you hit the nail on the head for me. And when you mentioned the part where, when it's a contract and if one person that doesn't have to make the decision, can't make the decision, then there has to be discussion. There has to be debate, because especially in this condo situation, I didn't even get to see the deal. I still don't know what the deal is. But at least if one person can't make the decision unilaterally, then everyone gets to see it, and there has to be a debate about it. And I think you just end up with a better product when something is vetted, right?
Completely agree. And to me, that is more what democracy and representative democracy should look like. It should be a debate. It should be messy. It should be people showing their data and producing their facts, so that it's not just one person. And look, the counter argument, the critique, what folks will say is, that will slow everything down. That will make it impossible to do business. That will grind the gears of government to the point where we won't be able to do anything. But I would just say that, to me, the current system isn't working efficiently or effectively. And so why not try something that would put the power more into the hands of people that elect their representatives versus just the one person who, again, I think we've seen too many examples of how just having that much power concentrated does not work out in the end for Baltimore.
And as you said, it's not about any one person. If you have a terrible system, I don't care if you're the Baltimore Ravens. If your defensive scheme stinks, it doesn't matter who you put in it, it's going to stink, right?
So,
Councilman Cohen, thank you so much for taking this opportunity. You did mention that you are running for City Council President. Tell us about your campaign and tell us what's happening with Zeke Cohen.
Absolutely. Well, let me just say it has been an absolute joy and a pleasure to get to traverse the entire city and just see the amazing neighborhoods that we have here in Baltimore. Last night I was up in Northeast in the Arcadia area for a house party, and just hearing from folks, just the love and the passion that people have for their community, it is honestly really inspiring. And I just fundamentally believe that Baltimore deserves better when it comes to city services. And particularly, I think about, we are 3 years out of the pandemic and we still don't have weekly recycling pickup. That is not acceptable. The fact that this last summer, we had, in the hottest summer on record, 4 public pools that couldn't get open. And that includes my own, in my backyard, Patterson Park pool, which is the second largest in the city of Baltimore. We still have schools, Lauren and Desmond, that in my mind look like jails. Just like when I used to teach in Sandtown in West Baltimore, and the school I taught in lacked reliable air conditioning, heat, drinkable potable water. There were bars on the windows. There was very little natural light. That is not a place that we should be sending children. And while we have rebuilt a bunch of schools, we still have some buildings that look just absolutely unacceptably poor for the richest state in the richest country on earth. I think about public safety and folks just wanting to feel safe walking around in their neighborhood. And it drives me nuts that we still have some officers that will sit in the car and watch what I see, which is people committing blatant crimes in broad daylight and not intervene. And to be clear, that is not a knock on the many hardworking women and men in the Baltimore Police Department, or certainly in our amazing sheriff's office, but it is to say that we need a better strategy when it comes to intervening in quality of life crimes. The other thing that is very important to me, as I think you both know, is mental health. And at a time, following the pandemic, we have just seen this huge mental health crisis. We've seen an uptick in overdoses. We've seen an uptick in suicidal ideation, in violence, really all across the country. And so I'm proud to have been the council person that sponsored and passed the first law in the United States of America to legislate trauma-informed care, because I will argue till I'm blue in the face that so much of what we see spill over into violence is the result of trauma. And if we could short circuit that disease before it escalates, I think we could do an enormous amount to save the lives of our children and of our residents. And so from now until May 14th, I'm going to be hitting every street in Baltimore. We are truly a grassroots campaign. We are everywhere at all times. And I'm absolutely loving it. It has been nothing but a joy. It has been also exhausting, because I also have 2 really little kids that if I'm not, with them all the time, they got something to say about it. But it has been just an incredible privilege to, one, get to represent my district, and then now to get to seek to represent the entire city. And I'm looking forward to it. And I love this place, and just extremely proud of the work we've been able to do in our district, which, last thing I'm going to say on this, District 1 is one of the few places that has grown demonstrably in the last census. We grew by over 5,700 people. It has become such a vibrant space where people really want to go and live and raise kids and send them to public school like my wife and I are doing. But there is no reason why the success we've had in District 1 can't be replicated to all of the 14 districts across our city. And that's what I'm looking forward to doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I can tell you, we're following all the Twitter feeds around here to see what's going on in the city. And I tell you, campaigning, you certainly look like you're in your element and out there meeting people. And we wish you the best of luck in the campaign. And make sure you're not away from those kids too long. All right. Make sure they remain the focus. Right. And
let me just say, I do want to just say thank you to you both, because I think that this is a real public service. I think that one of the things we are blessed about in Baltimore is that we actually have a really robust media ecosystem, right? Like I can't think of any other city in America right now that has not only one daily newspaper, but two. And then, the Sun and the Banner, and then you got the Baltimore Beat, you've got the Brew, you've got WYPR, WOLB, you've got just such a robust journalism media ecosystem for TV news stations. And then what I love about what you all are doing is that I really think it is about civic engagement and educating the public about what is going on in City Hall, what's going on with big issues like BG&E. And I just think that kind of, I don't know whether you consider it journalism, but just information gathering, I think is really, really, really important. And so I want to thank you both and the folks at Baltimore City Voters Live for making it happen, because it is important that people have as much information as possible. Whether you're going to
vote, the only way to make good decisions.
Someone else, you should know what we're about, and that's why this is such a good platform.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Those are very kind words. And no, we're not journalists. We're not media. We're citizens. This is a civic duty that we're performing. We are, volunteers at what we do. And part of my motivation for this is actually, for the work that you and your colleagues do, the 14 members of our council, who most people don't know, by the way, you only get paid a part-time salary, right, for doing triple time work. For the council.
I was not happy about that, but
exactly. Yeah, I happen to live in a district where we have a very good councilman, and I know the work that's put in, and I know the work that the good members of our council, like yourself and him, Councilman Schleifer, the work that you guys put in. So the fact that you guys volunteer so much of your time to try to make this city better, it actually gives me more energy to try to do my part as a citizen to support you guys' efforts. So we certainly appreciate, the praise for what we're doing here. It is just about putting information from every angle that we can put information out. We want to be different. We know that the media channels, they have like a regional appeal. So they can only give our local coverage, 2 or 3 minutes or so, or, so many lines in the paper. But as you said earlier, you about getting into the weeds, we're that place where we want to be in the weeds. It's extremely important to get down to the details. So to the extent that people want to be in the weeds and know the details, they can continue to view City Voters Live podcast. And but the show is made by folks like you, taking time out of your schedule and away from your family and the busy rigors of your jobs to come and give that information to the public. So thank you so much. Know that you're welcome here anytime, and we'd be certainly glad to have you back at any opportunity that you have when you have information to share with the people.
Absolutely. Appreciate you both. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.